Often today we talk about a character called Satan as if it's a personal name like Joe or John. In the Bible, it always appears as Ha-Satan, the Satan. Now, you'd never say the Joe or the John. So in other words, Satan is not a proper name. Satan is a job description or a noun. It's just a normal word, meaning the accuser. It's a legal term. It's in a courtroom, you need the prosecution attorney or whatever. So essentially, he's the legal adversary who appears in the Bible as somebody in the presence of God. God's like the judge seated on his throne, and the heavenly courtroom is assembled, and it is necessary to have a prosecutor present, and that prosecutor is Ha-Satan. And we see this most dramatically in the book of Zechariah, which describes this scene happening where a certain human is standing, Joshua the high priest, and Ha-Satan is standing at his right-hand side to accuse him. So we have a lot of examples of this adversary, Ha-Satan, the opponent, in the Bible. And often they can be quite mundane. It can be an adversary in battle, an adversary politically. A lot of the time it's an adversary legally speaking. He turns up in the book of Job as the one who stands up to be Job's adversary in the presence of God. And he's always named as this person, the Satan. He is a Satan to me, or he is the Satan in this particular situation. So in the book of Revelation, we're given a bit more detail about him. He's given two different names. He's given the name the Satan, who accuses in the presence of God, and his other job, we don't really know his name, we just know what he does. His other job is the devil, the one who deceives. And he deceives upon the earth, and he's the adversary in heaven. This is in Revelation, I think, chapter 12. Now, popularly speaking, and I think to a certain extent in the English imagination, this is largely due to John Milton's Paradise Lost. Now, there were other writers who did this, and this is a historic idea, but really it's John Milton's Paradise Lost who popularized this to such an extent in the English imagination. John Milton, when he tells the story in Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3 in this great epic poem that he wrote, he has the serpent as Satan incarnate. Now, you have to recognize that this is an extra biblical tradition. When you read the text of Genesis chapter 3 very, very carefully, it says that the serpent was the most cunning of all the creatures, the beasts, which the Lord had created. So it explicitly states that the snake in the Garden of Eden story is an animal just like all the other animals, except that he's smarter. The Hebrew word used at that point is the word arum. I have a very weak R, but imagine it's there. Arum. And everywhere else in the Bible, the term arum is translated wise. And actually, it's a characteristic which we are all to aim for. It's a very positive characteristic. So if you were to just read that one verse at the beginning of Genesis chapter 3, now the serpent was the most wise of all the animals which God had made, your instant impression would be, wow, serpents are smart. They're really, really positive creatures. And we have a talking snake in this story. Now, obviously, because of what happens and how that's understood in subsequent church traditions, they then read Satan into that passage, and they forbid a translation of the Hebrew arum as wise. They all say cunning or something like that to try and... It's the only time in the whole of the Bible that Hebrew word is not translated wise. Okay, so there's clearly something weird going on in the reception history of this passage. But this is just part of a whole lot of baggage which has attached itself to Genesis chapter 3. Another one, again, Milton plays a certain role in this, although he tries to mitigate it in a subtle way. The blatant misogyny in the way this passage has been received traditionally in Christianity, blaming Eve for the fall of the human race. Again, these things, when you read the passage carefully, they're clearly actually not there at all. So, as I said, John Milton is responsible for a lot of these preconceptions that we have when we come to reading the Bible, not because he invented them, but because his work has been so influential, especially in the English-speaking world. Now, Paradise Lost opens with Satan, proper name, right? Satan is in hell, having been cast down. And they're trying to now respond to how to resolve this. Now, immediately there, we have a lot of assumptions, a lot of presuppositions of how to join together all the dots that are in the Bible. And a lot of these can be questioned. A lot of these must be questioned. Famously, when Christ knows that he's going to have to suffer this terrible death, and Peter utters the words, no, right? He's dissuading Christ from his mission. When Jesus says to him, "Get thee behind me, Satan," you don't have to read that as a reference to the Satan who's the heavenly accuser. At that point, he's telling Peter that Peter has become his adversary. I can, as an Arsenal fan, refer to a Tottenham fan as my Satan, small s, not capital S, small s, my adversary. Because it's an adversary that's political or emotional or legal or on the battleground or whatever. It's an adversary. So "Get thee behind me, Satan" wasn't seeing an evil spirit in Peter talking. It was basically Peter had assumed the role of adversary to Christ at that moment, and he was being rebuked for that reason. So that's entirely different from Judas, where the devil goes in to inspire him to do what he does. Unlike God, Satan, the accuser, cannot be everywhere at once. He's a spiritual being and can only be in one place at one time. And actually, the Bible tells us exactly where he is throughout the church age. Throughout the church age, he is the accuser of, in other words, the accuser of the brethren. He is accusing the church in the presence of God. Now, Paul speaks elsewhere of how we have somebody in the presence of God acting as our, for want of a better term, our defense attorney. Somebody standing in the presence of God, defending us against these accusations. So the heavenly courtroom right now has God on the throne, it has Jesus defending the church, and it has the accuser accusing the church, the Satan accusing the church. Now, when the church is no longer on the earth, when the church age has come to an end, the church is being removed and placed into the presence of God, that heavenly courtroom scene is defunct. It is redundant. It is no longer needed. The church is beyond accusation because the church is now righteous and in the presence of God. So there is no need for a prosecutor. And the prosecutor is made redundant. And at that point, in the book of Revelation, we are told that he is cast down to the earth and very, very angry, which is justified because when you lose your job, you get cross, right? So he's then on planet Earth and he has but a little time, which is why he's really upset, and he turns his anger against the Jewish nation. Remember, we speak about covenants. If the Christians are removed, the only covenant people now in a meaningful relationship with God are the Jewish nation, and so he turns his wrath against them. They're the ones who brought Christ into the world. They're the ones who brought the scriptures and preserved them over the centuries. So that's why they come under the persecution. But at this point, he's not called Satan anymore. He's not called the accuser anymore. His name is now the devil, because his new job is to deceive the inhabitants of the earth. And that's what the devil does.